Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulil Kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Well, Dr. Nadeem Singh Sahab, Dr. Sagi Sahab, distinguished participants, brothers, sisters, sons and daughters. The topic today covers a very vast area, and I confess that when last night I was trying to formulate my ideas for presentation, I had quite a difficult time to pick and choose because it's time constraint. Another aspect is that the purpose of this program is not just a monologue, but we have called it an interactive session. My purpose is to present before you both a conceptual framework and also highlight some of the issues and challenges that we face in the current global context. I am not trying to answer all questions. I will share some of my thoughts and reflections, and would very much like to benefit from your questions, comments, and hope inshallah this would be an ongoing exercise. In fact, originally we were planning to have a series of lectures, but because of my health and engagements that could not be done, so I am trying to compress everything in this 45 minutes. I am starting perhaps in a slightly different way, because the current climate is permeated with a confrontationalist position. Although this is not new, but particularly after 9/11, the debate as well as the attitudes are more colored by the crusading spirit. You will recollect that immediately after 9/11 the action, George Bush, the then president, said that this crusade will continue for a while. After that, of course, a lot of breath was wasted in trying to explain it, what he meant. But I think even if it was a Freudian slip, it reveals a mindset. Same is the question of the reaction. Naturally, there are calculated, well-reasoned reactions, and there are also outbursts and tit-for-tat type of reactions. So in this context, I am trying to make my beginning slightly differently by suggesting that if we look into the vista of over 1400 years of engagement between Islam and the West, one finds two parallel scenarios. One characterized by confrontation, crusades, colonial period, presenting Islam as initially Christian heresy, then Antichrist, and so on and so forth. Then there is another scenario which perhaps is not that well recognized, and that is of engagement, of dialogue, of interaction, of competition, of cooperation. So we have two parallel paradigms. One of, for lack of a better word, clash of civilization, and the other of some kind of a partnership in history. So I am starting by reminding myself and all of you that it was in the 7th year of Hijrah, 1st of Muharram, that the Prophet ﷺ sent letters to different heads of the states, and among them the Byzantine, the Iranians and others, all were addressed. So letter to IPS, May 1, 628 Christian era, and 1st Muharram, 7th Hijrah is the date when that letter was sent. And it is very interesting that the responses from Persia and Byzantine were very different. That's how engagement began. Trade, diplomatic relationships, dawa encounters, benefiting from each other's experiences, impacting each other, has also been a parallel tradition. Sometimes overlooked, sometimes eclipsed. I think we are faced with a similar situation today. Conflict and cooperation. Both are on the horizon. Both are possibilities. The choice is ours. The choice is theirs, that how we have to respond, keeping in view the current global situation. I just leave it at that. The second point I want to share with you is that apparently, while we are all comfortable with this scenario of Islam and the West, if we reflect, we have to try to understand, are they comparable? Islam primarily is a message, a worldview, a set of values and principles, a code of conduct, a lifestyle, a society, a state, a culture, a civilization. Yes, ideas and ideologies have to articulate themselves in space and time. Geography is an important dimension. You cannot totally delink the two. Yet, by its very nature, while Islam is all these, Islam is not made of the East or the West, Orient or the Occident, South or North. Islam is universal. not merely conceptually, but also historically, also demographically. There has been Muslim presence all over the world, and particularly today, we note that while Muslim encounters and Muslim visits and some kind of Muslim presence has always been there, even during the prophetic period in the Khulafa Rashidun, Islam had reached up to China then. Similarly, Africa, Central Asia, you name it. Particularly in the second half of the 20th century, for the first time, major waves of population movement have taken place globally, with the result that in Europe and America today, Islam is the second largest religion. Presence of big Muslim communities, and not merely immigrants and workers or guest workers, now settled. First generation, second generation, third generation. So this universal dimension is very important. But when we talk of West, initially it is a geographic concept. We are trying to look upon a certain area on the global map. And that is correct in the sense that the central power, particularly during the last 6 centuries, it has been Europe and then America, that were the ascending power. 400 years of colonial rule, when globalization of West took place, but in the form of colonialism and imperialism. 5 major European imperial powers in the 19th century, Russia and America, the latecomers. However, the geographic locale is crucial and central to it. Without denying the fact that along with this geographic landscape dimension, this period, described as Western civilization's heyday, also represents a worldview, a set of values, a political dispensation, an economic role. But somehow, wherever the Western powers have gone, economically or politically or militarily, they were never assimilated. They didn't become part of the indigenous. As against that, wherever Islam went, keeping its identity, keeping its universality, keeping the general dimension, it became indigenous, part of the landscape. And there was no either or at that time. So while the concepts, the values, the principles, which are the hallmark of the Western civilization, they have influenced other parts of the world. They have played roles. Yet there is a very delicate difference, with the result that we and you is always there. The dimension of us is missing or very weak. So while we are comparing the two, we cannot neglect this dimension. So now the position is that on the one hand, we have European, American political cultural, civilizational dispensation. Geography has an important role, yet values and principles have also a part in it. A kind of a university, the global. On the other hand, when we talk of Islam, we talk of first and foremost a worldview, a faith, an ideology, a way of life, and a culture. And we also speak of a politico-geographic, strategic existence. We are discussing this issue in the context of the post-colonial period with 57 independent Muslim states, with a population of around 900 million to a billion, and over 100 Muslim communities the world over, and in sizable numbers, 400 to 500 million. So this mainland and then Muslim presence in other parts of the world. And that's why when we are talking of the issue of Islam in the West, these two layers are very much there. It cannot be ignored. The dealing between Muslim world and the political entity, even if it is divided into 7 states, and Muslim communities the world over, and their relationship both with the Ummah as well as the country where they are. So when we are comparing, this dimension cannot be ignored. The other aspect that I would like to invite you to reflect before we come to the core issues relates to the current historical context. I hope you realize that even in the West, there is not just one narrative. There have been many critical voices who have tried to revisit the way Western intellectuals, historians, strategists have been looking upon or presenting Islam. Yes, the predominant position has been adverse. Ignorance, misrepresentation and distortion, estrangement, enmity, and also a spiritual sympathy. We find this structure. The Christian missionary scholars, Orientalists, and now political strategists, which spread into media spokesmen, we find the critical, the adverse is dominant. And recent few surveys, particularly the series on religion and society, by and large, presents this very intriguing phenomena that only one hand from 70 to 52% roughly say that we are ignorant of Islam. And yet, over 50% say that Islam is violent, Islam is not compatible with other religions, Islam is not compatible with democracy and modernity. And as such, violence is the hallmark. Ignorance and yet these attitudes. And the numbers reveal that ignorance has not produced any humility or effort to make up for the gaps in knowledge. I do not say that similar surveys of the Muslim world would present a very different scenario. But I think this is a dimension that has to be kept in mind. Then, of course, the immediate experience of the colonial era, where political and the religious shaded drift into each other, helped each other, supported each other, and became rather indistinguishable. The whole aspect of Muslim contribution to history, of Islam's role in the development of human thought, human culture and civilization, human society and economy, science and technology, somehow either that was ignored, bypassed, or marginalized. Yes, on the periphery there are some voices who are trying to revisit everything, which is a very healthy development. But the ground reality is that it is the negative that is prevailing. And our own experience also was very bitter. Almost 300 years in different forms, we were ruled by the Western powers. They tried to malign Islam, marginalize Islamic forces, target them as enemies, try to produce a new leadership, intellectual, political, economic, which represented the Western interests from within the Muslim society as well as other communities who have lived in this part of the world. So that experience spread over 300 years is a living reality. And although last 60, 65 years, political fortunes have changed, and even balance of economic power has shifted, yet the fact remains that it is the West and the Western interests that have somehow an upper hand. And that is why neocolonialism is characterized not by direct control and occupation, but what historians have called indirect occupation. Penetration, manipulation, management, influencing, that is the new model. So this context cannot be ignored. Along with that, within the Muslim society, the phase of liberation struggle, and then the post-liberation period, we find that they have some distinct trends which have to be kept in view in any deeper understanding of the future of relationships between Islam and the West. First, there had been resistance, genuine, natural. But then this resistance had three dimensions. One was realizing disparity of power. Instead of regaining power, the primary interest was to protect and preserve our tradition. That is how orthodoxy and conservatism became an important force. But somehow this also involved a kind of a shrinking of the totality of the Islamic dispensation into very limited areas. So that is how the traditional reaction came. Another reaction was of acceptance, accommodation. Not rebellion against Islam outright. They wanted to have some kind of a compromise. Described as liberalism and modernism. Of course, the ruling powers also welcomed, encouraged, supported and strengthened in different forms. And within this, there were apologetics who tried to imbibe the Western values, make them part of the Islamic scheme, emphasizing that all that the West is doing, we have it. So they would like to keep the name, yet the substance, the details, they moved away. In confluence and conflict between these two reactions, a third force emerged, which we describe as the revivalist. This again had many shades. It's like a rainbow, not one color only. Yet the primary idea is that we have to protect our identity and independence. How to acquire it? We have to face the challenge and respond. Respond with loyalty to our own values and traditions, yet openness to what we can learn from others, and where there can be convergence and where there is divergence. So I think these three major movements have been there, ups and downs, still we are in that. Sometimes modernists have upper hand, sometimes conservatives have the upper hand, or at least without a voice, and sometimes the rivalists are more effective. And we are still in the midst of this struggle within. So that, in my view, gives us the two scenarios. Now, in my view, when we look to the present and the future, there is definitely an ideological dimension, which relates with the worldview, the vision of man and society, the values and principles, the type of society and state and the world that we want to see. And here there are serious divergences because, and here I say that entire human history is based on two nation theory. It's not something unique to the Pakistan struggle. There is one stream that is faith-based, a spiritual interpretation of the universe, the reality of God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the divine design, place of man in that context, and what is the responsibility and mission and role of humans that is the khilaf. Now the religious traditions vary. Even they are contradictory, conflicting. Yet this one stream, in my view, the most articulate, understandable, powerful is the Islam. Yet other religions also, other people who are trying to approach society and its problems from the angle of the faith, they do also follow them. The other is where we have a different worldview, the Enlightenment view, where man is self-sufficient, where you don't need to link yourself to the Creator, to the Divine. It is the human society that is the real field of study. So secularism, liberalism, the approach with which the Western civilization is primarily characterized, I don't deny that religious tradition still plays an important role. And there are very powerful influences which are driving inspiration from religion. Sometimes trying to reconcile, sometimes trying to assimilate. Here they are there. Yet these two different approaches are there. So that is the ideological dimension. The other, of course, is the political, military, and economic. And the third aspect is, in my view, cultural, civilizational, human. And on these three levels, the question of conflict and cooperation is very much there. And we have to address that. Before I proceed further, I would like to, just as a footnote, suggest that while the level at which I am trying to analyze, there is another level, and that primarily of threat perceptions, and then responses based on threat perceptions. I do not deny that it is on both sides. But the way Islam and Muslim world and Muslim people have been demonized, targeted, discriminated, as part of the strategy of the Western powers. When I use the term power, I don't mean merely the political power. Power in its widest sense, intellectual, political, economic, social. So that demonization is not perfect. And whether we like it or not, and I don't at least, but we cannot ignore it. We cannot run away from it. And overall political climate, even strategic policies are being framed not on the basis of objective analysis of the realities and facts, but on the basis of perceived and assumed and imagined threat perceptions. That lies at the root of many of the problems we all are facing. So in passing, I would like to mention that so that that dimension is not totally ignored. However, before I proceed further, I would like to raise one more question. And that is that while there has to be engagement, contact, competition, cooperation, and conflict, in respect of all these dimensions I have referred to, when we make an honest assessment of the ground realities of today, one finds asymmetry of power to be a major phenomenon. Yes, Muslims have become independent. They have economic resources. They want to carve out a space for themselves. But despite all the defeats and withdrawals of the colonial powers, asymmetry of power, technological, military, economic, political, intellectual, scientific, is very much there. And in the context of that, to project Islam as a threat is something that does not fit in, except at the periphery, where, as Clinton has also very perceptively referred to, that when there is asymmetry of power and It's not possible for people to attain even their just objectives. They resort to shortcuts. And violence and terrorism is one of them. So at that level, striking back and damaging becomes a phenomenon. Is relevant, it is there. Yet, if we see the total scenario, we find that there is a significant asymmetry of power, and the way I look upon it, and the way Muslims think is that power is an inescapable dimension in human relations. But power is not necessarily destructive. And power we can ignore only at our peril. So while we are discussing Islam and the West, we must be conscious of the fact that unless we set our own house in order, unless we have intellectual, economic, political, military strength, the competition would remain in a large way to the disadvantage of the weak. And fighting without preparation, confrontation without mobilizing and possessing the essential wherewithal to participate in this power game is something one has to be very, very careful about. So while definitely we are talking about terms of engagement with the West, intra-Muslim, intra-Ummah dimension has to be kept in view. And our bargaining, our effectiveness, our capacity to protect our interests or project what we regard to be best for the humanity cannot be delinked from this power base. So I want to emphasize that our thinking, our planning, our actions must not be leaps in the dark. Should be strategically planned. Of course, risk is always there. But the difference between risk and gamble is that risk is calculated. Risk is estimable. Risk is manageable. Not otherwise. So it is that context that we have to move. Now, having that said so, I would also say that in my view, there are three layers on which all these engagement or relationships have to take place. One, as I have said, is the ideological, the cultural, civilization dimension. Second is the political-economic, strategic, more directly power-related. Emergence and divergence both are there. Gains and losses have to be calculated, but this is very important. The third area relates to some specific irritants or specific opportunities, needs. We must not confuse these three, although they are interrelated. So clarity of thinking demands that we are formulating our goals, we are setting our objectives, we are spelling out our priorities, we are formulating our strategies, we are working upon the plans of action, tactics, instruments, actions, we must realize that for these three major areas, clearly defined objectives and processes should be part of that approach. Otherwise, the fallacy of aggregation would lead to serious falsification, both in our theoretical formulation and our practical steps. And among the irritants, I am starting with that. I am suggesting that the unfinished task of the anti-colonial movement is something that cannot be ignored or bypassed. To me, the issue of Palestine is a key issue. And at the analytical level, it's not different from the colonial model. It is a people under occupation. And unless that occupation is vacated, peace would not settle in this. How long it takes, nobody can predict. But it is a lesson of history that unless these ground relationships are corrected, tensions and conflicts and confrontations cannot go on. Kashmir, Chechnya, Mindanao, Patani, Arakan. I am not giving an exhaustive review, I am only giving illustrative. These remnants of that anti-colonial movement are very much there. And unless they are addressed, we may not be able to come out of the estrangement and conflict and rivalry that very much permeates these relationships. Secondly, I come to the politico-economic strategic area. It's a fact that despite freedom, we are not free. If freedom means capacity and opportunity to control and manage your own affairs, according to your own values, objectives, then the global system is based on injustice, power projections, exploitation, inequalities, control and manipulation of economic resources of the Muslim world and other than that. And to achieve that, political alignments, surrogates, interferences, direct, indirect, they are there over. I think under the spell of the terroristic narrative, these critical strategic issues cannot be ignored. They need dialogue, engagement, peaceful resolution. But if peaceful resolution is resisted or subverted, we cannot hope that struggle and conflict for rights would not take place. That brings me to the third and the real intellectual and cultural issue, and that is this whole idea of hegemony, the right of the powerful to control and dictate to others. and the intellectual obsession that our values must prevail, our interests are supreme. Whatever be the lip service we pay to human rights, to equality, to justice, the fact is that in last analysis, we can have two paradigms. One paradigm is where the dominant power should prevail and has the right to dictate to others. Whether it involves brinkmanship, economic manipulation, intervention, war, whatever that may. And the other, a pluralistic model where instead of hegemony, despite differences in power and resources, the right of the people to live according to their own values, their own life mission and objectives, accepting plurality, tolerance, neither an effort to impose your ideas, nor to barter and surrender your values only for an economic or political existence. Now, in my view, the fundamental difference between Islam and Western civilization lies here. Whatever be the protestations and claims, Western powers, whether it was in the naked colonial period or the contemporary phase of neo-colonialism and hegemonism, the issue is we and not others. If they have to live, they must conform. And here, permit me to just refer to a very significant observation in some of Huntington's interesting work, The Clash of Civilizations. I don't subscribe to his thesis, but I think this observation is very succinct. He says, the underlying problem in the West is not Islamic fundamentalism. It is Islam. A different civilization where people are convinced of the superiority of their culture and are obsessed with the inferiority of their power. The problem for Islam is not the CIA or the US Department of Defense. It is the West. A different civilization whose people are convinced of the universality of their culture and believe that they are superior if declining. Power imposes on them the obligation to extend that culture throughout the world. These are the basic ingredients that fuel the conflict between Islam and the West. I am grateful to him for putting this issue with that brilliantness. And here I want to make this submission that from the Islamic model, I don't say that we didn't have our lapses or failures. There have been many. In the past and even today. But the divine design as given in the Quran and Sunnah, is that Allah has created this world. Allah has created humans. But Allah has also endowed humans with discretion, with freedom of choice. The model is not forced conformity to a particular way, even if that is Islam. Quran says very clearly that if we wanted all human beings to follow Islam, this could have been done. But this we have not done that. We have given them the choice. That choice has to be protected. And choice can be used both, rightfully and wrongly. But the right of choice and the possibility of committing mistakes is part of the human dispensation. In fact, is critical to the role of humans as Khalifatullah does. Yes, you cannot run away from the consequences of your choice. Your choice is that. Those consequences would appear in this world and finally in the afterlife. There are two, one is fixed stones to the other. Yet, as far as life on this world is concerned, choice, right choice or wrong choice. And if we give this freedom, then plurality is built into it. That's why life and half is being after we are to the life. It's a fundamental part of it. So this model is pluralistic. Not that we have any doubt about the truth and reality of our faith. But also we believe at the individual level, at the community level, at the global level. Even at the level of power. The paradigm should be pluralistic, with opportunity to discuss, to engage. What is important is freedom to engage. That's why Quran says, "Qul tu ala bid'ah." So it is just dialogue and this interaction and engagement. And that has to be at all levels. And that is why, while power struggle is part of the human game, exchange of ideas, dawah, is the main instrument. Interaction, differences are part of the mosaic of human society in history. But we have to move away from this unilateral, this hegemonistic paradigm. Look to the irony that on the one hand we say all human beings are equal. On the other we say that an American citizen, American Marine, even if he commits murder and assassination, massacre and war crimes, cannot be tried under the law of the land where these crimes are committed. He is subject only to the American law. Now this is that single-minded, imperialistic, hegemonistic approach. And unless that is stressed and challenged, the global paradigm, peace and well-being can come only if this dialogue between Islam and the West moves towards a direction of a civilizational future where hegemonistic and one idea, one power, dominance is replaced by plurality, healthy competition, cooperation, and there are human situations, tension and conflict. That's part of the game. But the model has to be. That alone can give you a real global peace and justice. And I want to conclude by suggesting that we are today at a very important stage of human history. Allah has been Rabbul Alameen from day one. The Prophet ﷺ was Rahmatul Alameen as a part of his mission. Our global approach is not only a theoretical and ideological position, it is also historical. Yet, the world was not a global setting in the past. We are moving in that direction, and today we have reached a stage when contact, communication, interaction, engagement at the global level has become possible. We have become effective, not merely in a household, but throughout the landscape of the world. Also, it's a very important development that while nuclear weapons morally are atrocious, but there is a very important dimension of this nuclear capacity, and that is we have reached a stage where we either coexist or we all die. So war has been a very important instrument of diplomacy, economy, throughout human history. And I do not say that it has become totally irrelevant. Localized wars are a reality, and we may have to live with them. Technological wars are a reality. We have to adjust with them. But somehow, the global balance of power and terror, because of the nuclear capacity, has reached a stage where war has become only a one-time possibility. Which means that technology is also dictating us, not only by opening up the world, but also by closing the doors of at least some forms of destruction, so that we move towards a global system, which could be based on justice, where other were ihsan could be the guiding principle, where coexistence and cooperation have precedence over conflict and confrontation. And if there are conflicts and confrontations, there should be mechanisms to contain them. Otherwise, it is destruction of all. That is the historic moment where we are. And here, with all humility, I will submit that Islam has something very substantial to offer. It's the only hope for the mankind. But that hope can become real only if we become better representatives of Islam. We set our house in order and we realize that while personal piety, character, moral excellence, taqwa, commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is cardinal, is fundamental. It must be translated into the socio-economic political realm. The advice that is doled out to us is that this resurgent Islam, Islam which wants to transform humans and society to achieve certain objectives, and justice is the final objective. Ibadah is the final objective. Is actually militant Islam, political Islam. violent Islam. And the true Islam is Sufistic Islam, soft Islam. Terribly confusing, misleading. So what I am suggesting is that while this is the greatest opportunity that we have, that opportunity can be seized not merely by claims and pledges, but by clarity of thought, by responding to these challenges in the language of the times, with the instruments and means and technological wherewithal that is delivered. What a tragedy that the UNESCO reports on the Arab world, about 10 of them have come so far. We find that the number of books, universities, inventions, innovations, very steady. So what I suggest is that while we have to be clear about what we want to achieve, where there are areas of convergence, where there are divergences, where we should be confident about our own position and we should project them, we also have to realize that unless the Muslim world sets its own house in order, unless we put up a better example, we would not be able to serve our own deen and humanity. Because, as Allah has said, that this ummah is Ummat al-Wasat. And it has been assigned the task of being witnesses of the truth to mankind. In the same way as Allah's Prophet ﷺ was a witness of truth to us. So that is the framework, that is the objective. How far we can achieve it? The idea is not to destroy, the idea is to build. And whatever destruction or replacement comes within that process, it is a part of transformation. But our thinking must never be negative. Our objective must always be positive. And that is the approach that we should take. So I conclude by saying that while Islam and the West at the moment seem to be confronting each other, and the scenarios of clash of civilizations are being promoted at different levels, intellectual, political, economic, military. Yet, for the welfare of humanity, for the well-being of the Muslim Ummah, it is important that instead of adopting a reactive and emotional reaction, which can be justified and understood, but that cannot be done. To deliver, we have to have this vision, and then you have to prepare yourself so that you could translate that vision into reality. It has to be gradual, but every step should lead to the next step. But if we are just marking time or ignoring challenges and realities, then Allah's Sunnah is that those who fail to fulfill their responsibility, their role, they are bypassed by others. We should not expect history's new laws for us. We have to face them and we have to respond creatively, and that's the only way. And that's my prayer.